You are listening to the Real Men Feel Show with your hosts Andy Grant and Appio Hunter. Real Men Feel is all about encouraging men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to opening up discussions that most men aren't having, but you certainly don't need to be a man to join us. The Real Men Feel podcast is produced live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern for your growth and enjoyment. You can find more information about the Real Men Feel movement at realmenfeel.org. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or subscribe on iTunes by visiting realmenfeel.org/iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at realmenfeel.org and at facebook.com/realmenfeelshow. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. This is a weekly program, and your comments, feedback, and participation are welcome during the live show and anytime in the Facebook group, on Twitter, or at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's get into this week's show. Hello, and welcome to Real Men Feel. This is glorious episode 60. Can you believe it?
Woohoo!
Indeed, woohoo. I am your host, Andy Grant. I am a transformational energy coach. I'm an author and a speaker. You can learn about past and future episodes of Real Men Feel, our private Facebook group, coaching opportunities at realmenfeel.org. Today, May 16th, 2017, the day that we are live recording this show, there is a lot of fast-flying news and chaos coming out of Washington, D.C., regarding the president, class of information, the Russians, the Israelites, jeez, not the Israelites,
Israelis, yeah.
Spies and espionage, and now tonight the blowing up thing is, memos from former FBI Director Comey, and we've talked about the show previously that the seeming pace of time is accelerating, and certainly the pace of political chaos is certainly accelerating. Mm-hmm. But I invite everyone to just take a nice deep breath where they are, because we are not focusing on that tonight, right?
No.
We are here for the next hour, and we invite you to join us for the next hour to focus on joy. Today's show is a little different because my normal co-host is actually our guest, right? So please welcome, drumroll, guide, speaker, author, and crusader of joy, Mr. Appio Hunter.
Hey. It is kind of weird to be the guest, on your own podcast, but it's awesome. And it's so great to just, honestly, this to me, the two of us, plus Lori, plus whoever else decides to join us, is just such an awesome spot to be, because this shared space is for me a really truly joyous space. So what a perfect subject to be diving into tonight.
Cool, yeah. And the program began over a year ago, really as we didn't have guests. We would talk about whatever was going on.
Yeah, exactly.
And then people began to ask, "Can I be on?" I was like, "Sure." So,
why not?
Yeah. So I'm actually looking forward to making some space this summer to not have scheduled guests and to just have more free flowing again, as the pace of chaos and change and the world is accelerating to give us more freedom. But
indeed.
But again, tonight is really Appio's opportunity to step into the spotlight and share a big piece of your work.
Yeah,
it's something that you've been sharing ever since I've known you,
mm-hmm.
and it's called The Principles of Joy.
Indeed. And if you want to add to the chaos a little bit further, so a half hour ago, I was sitting with, just to kind of give everybody a little bit of background, and we've touched on this a little bit in past episodes of Real Men Feel, about my connection to source energy and my evolution from, channeling the collective known as Samuel to just being me to, sharing the principles of joy. Of course, the principles of joy were always there. They were always an aspect of and the core of the messages that were coming through. And to bring everybody up to speed, I guess the Twitter version of how everything went down is that I've always known of me being an empath, being aware of emotional energy, being connected to the emotional current. But when I started to really dive into that further, when I started to deliberately read emotional energy as part of my work, I started to realize that my connection was far greater, far more profound than I even possibly gave myself permission to imagine and to explore. And when I started to let go of that fear of exploring it, that's when I started, to connect. And my stint as doing, channeling the collective Samuel was really kind of me getting used to that. The original idea behind that was really kind of just, kind of me hiding behind that mask. B, being aware that humanity loved to receive messages from source energy, if you will, sometimes in a way that was non-threatening, not necessarily direct head-on. So that was the whole Samuel thing. Then, the collective, as I like to, call them, or jokingly the committee, they were like, okay, you can stop wearing the bunny suit. You can just be you. Because essentially that's what I was doing. I was wearing a bunny suit for just so that people could feel comfortable. And they're like, no, you don't have to do that anymore. Just be you. Just share these, principles of joy, and then I'll do the whole chaos thing here for next, and just do it as you, because there's no need to channel it, to bring it out, or anything like that. I'm like, okay, fine. So as I was sitting with them about half hour just before the show, they're like, by the way, since you're now really delving into this whole thing, Principles of Joy isn't quite right. It doesn't feel quite right. And if anything, it's a little bit too out there and ethereal. If you really want to help humanity and human beings just center themselves in joy, then stop using the word principles of joy, the term principles of joy, and instead refer to them as the tenets of joy. And I'm like, oh, well, thank you for that. And thank you for that just before we're about to do this whole episode on the principles of joy. And I thought it was rather an interesting choice of words, because when you look at the word tenet, in fact, I thought I had it pulled up here. Let me pull it up here really quick.
Yeah, because when you first told me this, I thought you were saying tenant. And like, well,
right.
That's confusing. Why would they, is it somehow joy lives in an apartment building of sorts, or like, I was trying to get that going, and yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know what a tenant versus a principal is. So what?
Yeah. So what's interesting, that tenant, as in a person who resides in a building, is kind of appropriate in a way, because joy resides in us. Joy is hardwired into us. Joy is part of us, and that's actually the second tenet of joy. So so the definition is any opinion, principle, doctrine, especially when held as true by members of a profession, group, or movement. And I don't know if you recall, but a while back, before we started doing Real Men Feel Together, you did an Akashic record reading for me. And what was one of the curious things that came up during that Akashic record reading was that I was gathering a movement of joy. And I'm like, wow. Which was really powerful, really interesting. And to have that definition out of the dictionary of tenet, T-E-N-E-T is how it's spelled, as something which is part of a movement, an idea, if you will, a belief, or I like to call them guidelines. I like to call them guidelines. Principle is a synonym of the word tenet as well. So there is that connection that's still there. But when you talk about a principle of joy, it's kind of like a law, if you will. And in reality, these are more like a set of guidelines and ideas that when you live by them, they really do help you, just experience joy and inner peace every day.
Okay, because a belief, we can choose our beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's correct.
by calling it a tenet and calling and identifying that as a belief held by a group or a movement, and to me that group matches the collective or the committee.
That's
source.
Exactly correct.
Right. Yeah,
that's exactly correct. And what's really fascinating as well is that the hold on just a second. So something was just it's usually when I'm connected, there's things that come through that can totally distract me.
So you're consciously tuned into source, to the committee right now. Is that right?
I am. And so what I'm picking up right now, what I'm getting, the impression that I'm getting is essentially joy is something that is more experienced in our human state. Joy as a concept, joy as this idea, if you will, is useful in our human states to kind of help us navigate this life, to help us connect and ground ourselves to the totality of who we are. But joy, once we are reunited with the totality of us, we're no longer focused on this physical experience, but just back into our non-physical state, if you will, is it's something that's just simply there.
Is it much more of a it just is. It's like
it is exactly. And so that's why we quickly needed to make some minor adjustments to the principles of joy, the 5 tenets of joy, if you will, just before we started recording, mostly because of the fact that it was there. Now that I'm understanding it and a little bit more clear about the whole idea of joy and so forth, that it is it needed to be a little bit more explained a little better, if you will.
And
yeah.
So when I read the Akashic records, I don't remember what was told to people, especially years later, which I think the reading you're talking about was years ago.
It was about 2 years ago or so, right?
Okay. So were you consciously channeling? Did you have the principles of joy at that point in your mental consciousness, or
not consciously aware of them, but I was already sharing them, which was curious. I was already sharing them without being consciously aware. That's what I was sharing.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah, so it was really, really fascinating how just all of this started, unfolding and coming out and just going in a progression. And as I've tapped in more and more and become more and more aware of that connection with source energy, it has just been fascinating to see the progression, but also how, because energy itself is so fluid and energy is always, that current has swirls and eddies, and it can seem chaotic at times, but in reality it's so beautiful to experience and witness. And so even but for the human minds tend to like things in a very sequential order. They like to have things being progressing in a linear way. But when you are more aware of not just your the physical aspect of your existence, but the totality of your existence, the totality of who you are, that things do seem a little bit more chaotic, and they can come out a little bit in a little bit more chaotic fashion as well.
So kind of like, so if we were, when we're not in physical form, if you're truly, you're in oneness, you're connected to not connected, mm-hmm. You are source. The body's not here.
Yes.
The tenet of joy might just be joy, because that's all you need.
Absolutely. Exactly. Okay. Exactly. So in the non-physical realms, really, you have 3 states that everything is interconnected. Everything is even in the physical realm, everything is connected. Joy as a concept is just kind of part of all of that. It's really part of all of that. But joy as an expression is definitely much more of a human thing, because it's what kind of helps us follow the line of progression, if you will, follow that need to have a connection of something, joy is what kind of helps to establish that connection, if you will.
Is joy the highest level or vibration of emotions that a human might have? Is that why it's being called out?
Well, the highest vibration of all emotions would be love.
Right, that's what I thought.
That is the highest, hands down, of vibration. It's funny because love used to be a very, very big part of what I used to talk about, and what I have talked about. As I've started to, understand more the love and joy. Love is something which is even greater than joy, but greater certainly helps us to experience the connection, which allows us to experience the highest vibration of love and light and truth.
Yeah, because once you're there, love encompasses every emotion, so it's kind of helping us climb to that even higher state.
Yes, exactly.
Because I imagine it'd be really difficult if you are truly feeling joyous all the time, like to stop there and go, but I don't feel love. Like that seems like hard to not go there. Right?
That's exactly correct. It's like everything is so intertwined, and when you experience one, you'll inevitably end up experiencing the other. But again, because in our human state, our human minds like to separate things and kind of compartmentalize things, it's sometimes necessary. Even our language is a language that compartmentalizes things in order to kind of help us make sense. So, but when you are able to kind of even let go of language, because language can really, really limit you, and just allow yourself to just experience, everything can be experienced all simultaneously, which is crazy to even attempt to explain.
Well, certainly, at least for the sake of this show, we are communicating in language.
That's exactly right. And I will do my best.
Yeah, so let's jump in. And so what's the first tenet of
Beautiful.
Joy?
So the first tenet of joy is that you are not responsible for anyone else's happiness but your own. And the reason why this is so important to understand is because in our culture and in our society, we have continuously been conditioned to think that that joy is something that comes from outside of us. And I used the word happiness in this particular tenet of joy, the first tenet of joy, because it is the emotion which tends to come and go the most. Joy, which is, might as well just share the second one right now because these two tie into each other. And that joy is a part of us. It is a natural part of us. It is a regular part of us. We can't be separated from joy because it is just hardwired into who we actually are. Happiness, however, is the everyday expression of joy, the everyday experience of joy, if you will, on an emotional level. So our society has conditioned us to think that happiness is something to be chased, that joy is a thing that needs to be possessed. Joy simply is. Joy is simply there. It is not a thing that needs to be sought after or possessed. Happiness is certainly not something that needs to be sought after or possessed. It is merely an expression of our current state, right here, right now. It comes and it goes, just as the ebb and flow of the tide. But when we think of it as being something that needs to be possessed or sought after or pursued, it removes us from that daily experience of joy.
So letting it come and go, as opposed to, oh no, it went, now I've got to go chase it. That's just knowing like the tide.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is where it ties into our interpersonal relationships. How whoever's listening right now, and I'll ask this of you, Andy, how often growing up did you experience somebody essentially putting the expectation of you, perhaps not in those exact words, but you certainly experienced the expectation that somehow you are responsible, the way you behave, what you do is you need to behave this way, you need to do these things in order for me, that other person, to be happy.
Sure. I mean, those conditions, especially for children, are always meant. Don't make me angry. Don't make you regret this. All sorts of words start popping up about that.
Exactly. And so from a very, very early age, we start to experience this. We start to be conditioned to think that how other people behave and what they do is a direct condition of our being able to experience happiness and joy. But that is complete and contradiction to the actual first tenet, which is the only person for whose happiness we are responsible is our own. And when we take responsibility for our own joy, our own happiness, then we are also setting ourselves up to do our greatest good, to be selfless. Oftentimes people may say, oh, you're being selfish. And it's true, you are being selfish. What you're basically saying is that I'm saying no to you and the demands that you are placing on me, because that goalpost is always going to be changing. The criteria are always going to be shifting. I'm never going to be able to make you happy based off of the criteria that you're giving me, because you're always going to throw something else at me. So I'm going to say no to your conditions, and I'm going to say yes to what feels best for me. I'm going to make the decisions, and I'm going to do the things that feel best for me. And when you do that, you actually free yourself to make the decisions and to help other people in a way that is most joyful and feels best for you. And people who make that decision, people who oftentimes are labeled as rebels and nonconformists and so forth, they've never lost sight of that particular tenet, that aspect of who they are. They've learned from their very early age that nope, this isn't aligned with who I am. So they say no from the get-go to the demands of others, so that they can say yes to themselves and share the best aspects of themselves with the world, and being selfless, truly selfless in that way.
And the notion that, and again, I love mixing this up too for people, that your selfishness is really selflessness. So any individual willing to really take responsibility for their joy, to seemingly selfishly put their joy first, is actually spreading and helping more joy than if you're depleted and going, oh, I'm trying so hard to make you all feel joyous.
Exactly, because it's never going to happen. It has to come from within you first. So when you make a decision, I'll use the example for myself. I have an incredibly wonderful relationship with my mom, but it's also had its history of a lot of toxicity and codependency and everything like that. But once I learned to say no to her so I could say yes to me, I've put myself in a much better position to gratefully, joyfully, and happily say yes if she needs something. Because it's my decision, not because she expects it of me, but because it's a decision that I am making because I truly love her.
And it's more ways of growing up, and when your parents say, oh, you made me so proud, or you made me so happy, you're making me cry tears, like all these different things that you made me feel. Mm-hmm. So it can give you a distorted sense of power, or that you're giving yourself away, as opposed to, so maybe the more honest thing is, I'm feeling your pride. Is there a proper way to experience it in a relationship?
What it is that you're placing conditions on yourself and you're placing conditions on others. And by removing those conditions that you're placing on yourself and on others, what you're doing is you're setting yourself up to understand that, again, joy is hardwired into you. Joy is part of your daily experience, no matter what.
So as a parent, I can be a joyous parent regardless of if my children bring home straight A's or straight F's.
That's exactly correct. That's exactly correct, because ultimately what we're doing is if we put ourselves in that position where we can celebrate our children no matter where they are, chances are likely that they're not going to be bringing home straight F's, because oftentimes the straight F's are actually the symptom of them feeling that straight jacket of the expectations being placed around them, and the noose that's about ready to be the hangman's noose that's about ready to choke them off.
Almost I can't win, so why even try?
Why even try?
Conditions.
That's exactly correct. And when there are no conditions, so there are no expectations except for you to make the decisions that are best for you. When your wings are allowed to spread, you're going to soar no matter what. So
and all those sensations, like that's a joyous sensation.
it
right?
is oh yeah,
that freedom, that soaring. It's all feeds on itself, really.
That's exactly correct. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So, and ignore the dog. I think somebody's just outside the door. I don't know if you heard him whining or not. So, okay.
I hear a joyous dog. I have
exactly.
No problem.
Oh gosh. So
Cool.
the second tenet, I need to catch myself here because it's just the change was so abrupt.
Yeah.
No talk about chaos there. So the second tenet, again, I'll repeat that your human experience is the ultimate expression of joy. That you cannot be separated from joy because joy is a natural part of you. And so just live yourself, be yourself, live your life. And when you do that, you'll know joy.
So to me, this sounds like gratitude. Like this, you can always find something to be grateful for. And so joy is always there. No matter what's happening, no matter what the circumstances are, there is joy available to you.
Yes. And there are even plenty of scientific studies out there that show that, it isn't the happy person or the joyous person who's grateful. It is the grateful person who is joyous. And if you want to ask for a chicken and egg, fine, then let's say the chicken is the chicken is gratitude and the egg is the joy.
Right.
If you want to use that particular metaphor, but really there is no chicken and egg because they're all the same.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to think, can I even conceptualize that I can be ungratefully joyous or, unhappily grateful, and it just
they're inseparable. They are completely inseparable. And when you are not able to experience gratitude, and again, that goes back to those conditions that we learn, which ties into that first tenet. And that is when we place conditions on our experiences, we're cutting ourselves off. We're separating ourselves from, we're not even separating ourselves because we're never separated, but we are
it's
dulling our
awareness.
Exactly. Yeah. Funny, we both came up with the same idea at the same time. That's exactly it. Yes. You are dulling your awareness of what is actually already there.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So, ready for the third tenet?
Let's dive into the third tenet. The third tenet, the experience of joy is as natural as breathing. Allow yourself to delight in simple pleasures, and joy will show up in extraordinary ways. That, to me, is one of my favorite tenets, personally, because if you really think about it in terms of joy being part of us and being hardwired into us, all you need is to just look at your own life, really. I sometimes in the past have used the example of, watch a child, they can go from, crying to laughing and giggling in the space of a half hour. Children who in certain circumstances may, that we would say would be absolutely horrible. For instance, a child in a refugee camp, or child on those Save the Children commercials or whatever. Once the cameras stop rolling and you continue to observe them, guess what? They're going to be laughing. They're going to be experiencing their lives. They don't know anything that's different. Nobody's told them that you have to feel this particular way. They simply experience joy, period. And if we look at our own lives and we're not thinking about things, we're not overanalyzing, and we're not focusing on all the stuff which is going through our heads, we're going to find that joy is present and it's there. And it's so natural that we don't think about it, Just as we don't think about when we're breathing, except, if, we're not able to breathe, then we start thinking about it. And that's what happens when you have all these expectations and all these judgments and everything else which get piled up on us. It's like having an elephant sitting on your chest.
So it's almost like we notice the anomalies of the moments of not feeling joy kind of stand out in our memory because they're so different.
That's exactly correct.
Like, I'm sure everyone's had an experience of being heartbroken at some point, but if you stop and look, but how many people, the one or two, the people that broke your heart, what about all the other people that you think about that ever liked you and loved you and supported you?
Yes. So those moments stand out in contrast. And we're very acutely aware of those moments because it's like, it's not there. I don't feel it. And it's just like the person who suffers from asthma or who is just whatever it is, when they know they can't breathe, they know it. It's the same thing with the experience of joy. When we are suddenly out of balance and we're cut off from that joy because of our focus in the moment, we acutely feel it. And then when we let it go, it's there.
Yeah, and it's easier to fall into the victimhood or the blame or this is where I'll always be now or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then we start off running off with our stories and
and then you start chasing. I've got to go find my joy again. Where to go?
Exactly. Yeah. And I cannot emphasize this enough. Joy is not a thing to be sought. Joy is not a thing to be possessed. Happiness is not something to be pursued. It is simply there. It is always there. It is always a part of you. There's never a separation.
Cool. Yeah, just like there's always the next breath. There's always plenty of oxygen for us to breathe.
Uh-huh.
There's that much joy available to us too.
Exactly. Always, all the time, never switched off.
Cool. There's not a no joy zone.
There's no joy zone. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So now we're up to the fourth tenet.
The fourth tenet of joy: every emotion you feel is an expression of the totality of your experience. This one is really meant to really help the human part of us understand that emotions are an acute part of the human existence and an acute part of our experience. Our emotions are very much our natural GPS system. They are what help us understand when we are making a choice that is not aligned with us as joyful beings. And they can help us experience and guide us the best direction that we possibly can. The labels that we have for our emotions, the good emotions and the bad emotions, things such as, depression and anger and anxiety. And, there are scales that people have created. And I think those scales are wonderful because at the very least, it gives us a reference point. They give us something to be able to, again, in our language, give at the very least a concept and idea and express it in a way that kind of helps us give us a reference so we can relate to each other. But in reality, every emotion is pretty much the same emotion, just in different energetic states.
So being in joy, having joy be our natural state, doesn't mean you won't also feel other emotions.
That's exactly correct.
And feeling another emotion doesn't mean you've lost joy.
No, yeah, exactly. You haven't lost anything. Again, this is the human experience of emotion is very different than what I call the divine experience of emotion. Because yes, emotions exist in all places and in all realms and in all dimensions. It's just that they are experienced differently in the human state. They're experienced more acutely in the human state. And we assign labels and we use those emotions to exacerbate our feelings of judgment or exacerbate the feelings of expectations, the expectations that we have and so forth. But if we are able to, instead of resisting certain emotions and allowing others, if we just allow them to all come and go, and then we let them go and let them flow. Because that is their natural state.
Right. Then I always find when you let a so-called negative emotion be felt, on the other side of that, like that runs through you, and then there's relief or joy again.
That's exactly correct. You're right back to that joyous life, the joyous existence. That's exactly correct. And human beings do have a very fascinating tendency to want to cling to things. We love to cling, and it's like, I don't want to let go of this feeling because I'll never experience it again. And you know what? You're right. You never will experience it again in that particular way. But you will experience that emotion again in a slightly different way. There are infinite ways to experience the same emotion. It's just that it'll be different.
And even when it's again a so-called negative emotion, I find, I'll own this, I can like hoard onto things that don't feel good.
Yeah.
Everything stinks, and it's a stinky place, and I'm just not going to let go of this because this is what I'm used to. Because this one moment has been so long.
Exactly. And you know how we as human beings love to come up with stories to tell ourselves, especially victim stories. That when we cling to those quote unquote bad emotions, it's because it helps us to justify the victim story.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why certain philosophies and certain dogmas have such great appeal, because there's one aspect of us, there's a human part of us that does not want to take responsibility for ourselves. And so when you're able to place it on, a devil or a god, it's God's will, or the devil made me do it, or all these other things and so forth, which is fine. I mean, if that's what you want to tell yourself, which it's perfectly okay. There's absolutely no judgment whatsoever from the perspective of source. But it's so appealing to our human part, because then we don't have to take responsibility. We can dump it off on somebody else. But of course, when we dump it off on somebody else, then it makes it a lot easier to become a victim and to cling to all that gunk.
Right.
All that crap that weighs us down.
Victimhood there's the illusion that it's easier, but it's easier to be in that space and stay there seemingly, but it feels worse to do so.
Yes, exactly. And until the pain becomes so great, oftentimes you just want to stay there. You want to keep wallowing in it because, it covers you up. It sticks to you. It feels like, this nice comfy little skin that's all over you. And the moment that, a little part of that mud and that gunk gets washed off, and you experience the actual experience of like that wind blowing across your skin or whatever, speaking from an emotional state, it's like, oh my God, I don't want to feel that because it's so unusual. That feels different. I don't want to feel different. I want to feel comfortable. But that is merely us buying so fully and so wholeheartedly into this illusion of our human physical existence and all the pain that's associated with it, that we just don't want to let go. And the saying is, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. I completely, wholeheartedly agree. Source says the same thing. In fact, the committee, they're like, yeah. And the suffering really comes as a result of us, not wanting to let go, resisting, and B, wishing things were different but not wanting to do anything about it.
Yeah. It's such an ironic, contrary thing to let our minds allow that, well, my willingness to feel whatever's showing up, to feel horrible now, lets it pass through me and allows joy to show up.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah. And that's just, until you experience enough times to trust, to surrender that, it's just like, no, that can't be. And
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. Surrender is a scary thing. Especially for, if you buy into the whole illusion of I need to control it all. Surrender is perhaps one of the most challenging things you can possibly do. In fact, I was talking to a colleague of mine from work yesterday, and he readily admits that he needs to be in control of all of it. And so we talked a lot about just the whole idea of detaching and not being attached to the needs to be right, the needs to control. But by detaching, you end up being in more control because now you're going with the flow.
Right, so you can control your own navigation in the flow as opposed to controlling the flow itself.
That's exactly correct.
So control your boat as opposed to control the river.
Yes. Yes.
And I want to take this back to one, because we talk about you're not responsible for anyone's happiness but your own.
Yes.
So what's the difference between responsibility and control? If I inserted control, like can I control my own happiness?
That is a great question. I really love that. Let me sit with this for a moment, because
I'll play her on hold music.
Right.
No.
What I'm getting is no. You can't control your happiness, but you can allow your happiness.
That's what, control. I mean, it's definitely word. Yeah, it's too controlling. So responsibility is more fluid. Yeah.
Responsibility
Ownership.
is fluid. Exactly. Control is ultimately again, it's a violation of that first principle. Control is an illusion. You can here's a better way of thinking of control. Control is, as it's defined by human beings and as it is emotionally interpreted by human beings, is an absolute illusion. A better way to think of control, and perhaps redefine control, is the making conscious choices based off of what feels best right now. And if you always make a choice based on, what feels better? What am I going to do? Is it this or this? And when you make a choice based off of what feels better right now, you are always going to be in control, because you're always making the best choice for you right now.
Yeah, so choice is more dynamic and conscious, and control is kind of, I'm just going to flip my joy switch and it's always on, the end. You can't take it away from me.
Control is trying to force it. Allowing yourself to make the best feeling choice right now is literally allowing it. And so control is better associated with resistance and forcing, and making the best feeling choice is more associated with just letting everything flow, allowing yourself to be in that space of joy, and allowing yourself to live the most joyous life possible.
And that allowing it is going to change from time to time. Like doing your best changes. So joy is always here, but the amount of joy I feel can fluctuate.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are so many different ways of being able to experience it on an emotional level. Joy always is. Joy is always there, but how we experience the joyful life does have different ways. Yes, it comes and goes and shows up in different ways depending on where our thoughts are, where our energy is being directed, what we are focused on, the stories we're telling ourselves, the illusions that we're choosing to buy into. And
it really makes sense that it would have to be some flow and joy. Otherwise, if we're truly, as a human being, you're traveling around, you're so joyous, you're literally crying tears of joy in every moment of your experience. That's gonna bring challenges in it.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yes. In fact, I'm so reminded of our episode that we did on the New Age bullshit. It's like this whole, that's another illusion. The fact that you're going to be happy all the time and joyous all the time, it's like, that's another human story, another human illusion. It's like, you are going to experience the ups and downs. That is part of this. But when you allow yourself to just experience the ups and downs, because the ups and downs are also what help guide us. They help us make the most joyful choice right now.
So it's choosing to joyfully allow all of your emotions to show up, be felt, be expressed, and move on.
Yeah, hell yes. Absolutely, yes.
All right. I feel like I've been living these principles the last month solidly now. All right.
Right.
I'm getting an A.
A plus. The committee was just saying, no, you're getting an A plus. They're giving you massive props right now.
Cool.
So then I guess we have the fifth tenet. The fifth one is now this one used to be, when essentially in essence when you look you, the world does too. But really, it never quite fit in, and I always wondered, why is it sitting there? And it just was like, okay, well, I'll sit on it for now because I just don't know how else to express it. Now, just before we started recording, it just came through finally as what it was always meant to be. So the fifth tenet is that when you are joyous, the universe celebrates with you. Rejoice in who you are, and joy will be a constant. And you can, if you want, you could even add on to that, joy will be your constant companion. And, this is one that I think will really help a lot of people when they learn to embrace this particular tenet, that just be joyous, be yourself. Make all the other four tenets tie into this one. They all lead up to this one. Because this one essentially means that when you allow yourself to just be joyous, not even experience joy, but to be joyous, you're going to find that everything can be a celebration. And that includes those moments of contrast. You're going to find that gratitude is as natural as breathing. Joy is as natural as breathing. Everything is as natural as breathing. Things won't necessarily knock you off track or off into the woods. In our human state, we will always have those moments of contrast. But we can still be joyous in those moments of contrast because it's like, oh my God, I can actually know that this particular moment that is causing so much distress is also giving me infinite opportunities to make choices that are going to ultimately be the best choices for me.
It's all giving you more opportunities for you to choose to be responsible for your own happiness and joy.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. There's always going to be, there are quite literally infinite opportunities to be responsible for your joy.
Yeah.
And yes, Lori, when we live in our core, we are in joy.
Right. And an affirmation that I say to myself countless times a day, I love life and life loves me. And again, that's I'm in joy and the universe celebrates joyously with me. And,
yeah, exactly. Even if you have to say it through gritted teeth at times, it's still a truth.
I'm joyous, so joyous right now. I'm so joyous I'll kill you all, yeah.
Exactly. And there have been times when I'm like, oh, I celebrate the contrast. Fuck the contrast.
Yeah. and going that way, having a rant on it can be a way to celebrate it because you're now giving yourself permission to feel those other emotions.
Yes.
You ride that energy wave, and again, I find every time I'm willing to go on I'll call it the negative ride,
right?
It ends back with joy. There's that release. There's that peace. There's
Exactly. It's like, bring it on. Let me feel it. And in the feeling it, it's like you realize that you are full and complete and whole because you are feeling it. And that's the fun part about each of these tenets and how they intertwine and they interconnect, and every single piece of it can be related to the other. And there are actually others that just haven't come through yet because I needed to kind of like distill and get these down first. But there are so many tenets, and again, these are simply guidelines that help root you in truth. And mind you, that truth is as individual as humanity. There are truths, universal concept, universal truths that truth with a capital T, but then there are truths with a small t, which are the infinite expressions of the truths with the capital T, the universal truths. Yeah.
So are there any practices or habits that the collective has ever shared to really help human beings embody some of the tenets?
For sure. One of them is actually a couple of them are already embodied in the tenets themselves. Allow your emotions to flow, embrace all of them, and you will live that joyous life. It's find ways to express gratitude, find ways to celebrate whatever it is that you're going through. Because when you understand that joy is, the joyous life is your life, it is the most natural state of being, you can find ways of saying, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing this, and I'm grateful for this because it is allowing me to feel and express joy in ways I had never thought I could have expressed before.
We talked about selfless selfishness.
Yes.
Right? So putting yourself first, doing things that bring you joy, feed all the tenets.
Saying no to others so you can say yes to you, so you can then say yes to others because you're doing so from a place of joy.
Right. The fullest version of you can do more, can be of more service than a depleted, resentful, miserable bastard version of us.
Exactly, because you're doing it because you're making yourself happy, and it's not an expectation that's being placed on you. And so there's that. There is another thing which the collective has said that's really important to keep in mind, that everything it's the simple things that allow us to experience joy, to live joyously and to live joyfully. So to give an example, something that's very practical that we can do, something is to, if you want to tell your emotions to take a hike, take your body for a hike. You want to tell somebody else to take a hike, take the hike yourself. Quite literally, take a hike. Go out for that walk. The thing about our bodies and our brains is that they evolved to a point where our brains basically grew and evolved and so forth while we were running from either toward our next meal or away from something that's trying to make us its meal. And so because our brains are wired in a way to think more clearly when we are exercising or we're constantly in movement, do that. And you don't necessarily have to quiet your brain. I mean, there's so many different forms of meditation. Meditation is beautiful and wonderful, but you don't necessarily have to force your brain into a state of being quiet. You can actually follow your thoughts. You can actually follow. A good example of a non-traditional meditation would be to engage in something that you truly love to do, such as painting or cooking or writing or playing a video game. Okay. That one seems like really off, but as crazy as it sounds, when you're doing that and you're joyfully experiencing that video game, that is a form of meditation.
So it's the question in the back of my mind that video games reminded me of is, can we go too far with our perceived version of joy? And I'm thinking of, if I think I'm joyous when I'm drunk, if I think I'm joyous and I've been playing video games for 24 hours straight, can it fall into an addictive disillusionment of joy? Or
Absolutely, yes. Because the reason addictions exist is because we're actually using those activities to distract us from something else that's a little bit more painful. And so those activities which may appear to be joyful in reality are distractions. So ask yourself that question. Am I doing this as a distraction, or am I doing this because I truly enjoy doing it and I don't need to distract myself from something else?
And that's just a question that, again, we can't ask someone else. It's not like invite someone's judgment about that. It's an honest, self-reflective.
It is an
question.
honest, self-reflective question, yes. And so, I mean, for instance, am I going on this walk because I just want to escape what's at home and I don't want to be there? Or am I going on this because I just want to be reflective? Am I going out to, to happy hour and coming home rip roaring drunk because it's just an environment that I don't want to be at? Or am I just, and here's the thing, addictions are really symptoms of the painful stories of trying to avoid the responsibility, of believing that things are outside of ourselves and that there's something to be obtained, that there's something that needs to be there and present that's from outside of ourselves that in reality has never been missing. So those are really just symptoms.
Right. And I guess that would make, because one of the tenets is allowing every emotion. But if I'm so like, no, it's my right to be joy, I'm going to choose joy, and I'm going to ignore these other feelings by using drugs, alcohol, using some sort of distraction to a level of addiction, to a level that it's interfering with my life, and I'm calling it, no, I'm taking care of myself because I like this, that's lying to myself.
You are lying to yourself. That's exactly correct. You're using that as an excuse, and you're not allowing all of the emotions to flow through.
Yeah.
And you're basically out of balance.
Yeah. Okay. Because I can remember plenty times in my life when times I was drinking a lot and everyone seemed to be happy and fun and this is the thing to do, and I'd be drunk or getting drunk like, I don't even like this. Why am I doing this? I'm like, I'm already unhappy.
Right?
And the way this evening's going.
Yeah, and it's funny because even though I've never been drunk in my life, I mean, I do remember one particular New Year's Eve when I had 2 glasses of champagne, and I was definitely feeling a little bit more tipsy than normal, but I've never been actually drunk before because I've never liked alcohol. But I've had my other addictions. I've had other addictions that I really engaged in to distract myself. And when I realized, like, I don't really enjoy this. So yeah, and that's when I realized I was resisting. I was resisting something.
And I think something that would help that is to make a conscious new choice of joy as opposed to, well, for years this has brought me joy, right? That's something that is, a false habit. Can show up as an addiction, right?
Correct.
Maybe it did bring you video games, cocaine, whatever it might be. It might have been joys at some point, and then it is.
That's exactly correct. Oftentimes it can start off, and here's where it helps to be aware and helps to be very much in tune with how you are feeling, and always asking yourself that question: am I doing this because I'm trying to escape, or am I doing this because it really feels good? And there are things which start off as a truly genuine, I'm feeling good, I'm really enjoying this, but then when you start going to it much more frequently, because it's like, well, I don't want to deal with this over here. That's when, if you are aware enough, that's when you can basically take a break from it and set it aside and not use it as your distraction or your diversion.
Yeah, because in my experience, new experiences bring higher levels of joy than if I'm doing it for the umpteenth time.
Correct.
Right? So that's another way to possibly help people discern, am I distracting myself or am I really enjoying what I'm doing?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Cool. Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. Well, I hope people have had joyful insights as part of this discussion. But I'm also glad to recognize that we're not responsible for anybody else's feelings.
Indeed. You're only responsible for your own.
Beautiful.
And that can be a scary thing too. Taking responsibility for yourself can be a scary thing, and that, I want to acknowledge that. But it's not. I can tell you truthfully that it's not that scary. Taking responsibility for your expressions of happiness and for living your joyful life is actually the most liberating thing you could possibly do.
Yeah.
It is not a burden. It is an extension of joy.
Yeah, there's a freedom in that again isn't it because it can feel safer. The illusion of victimhood and like, oh, I've surrendered. Because all these words can be thrown together and misunderstood. But if I surrender to life means I lay down and do nothing. But taking responsibility means there's a freedom, there's a gift, there's liberation, because if I'm the only one that can change my life, that can have me feel better, that's true freedom.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not waiting for someone else to change their mind, change their opinion of me, their judgment of me. Yeah.
Because that's what a lot of people fail to understand, is that as we are resenting others putting their expectations on us, we're oftentimes doing the exact same thing. We're putting our expectations on them. And when we liberate ourselves from all of that, not only the expectations of others, saying no to others, but saying no to our expectations of others, true freedom ensues. So I'm so glad that you said that.
Yeah, because that's an important, maybe it's a Tenet 1B or something. But, if we are all responsible for us, it means allowing everyone else to be responsible for themselves.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I will tell what's kind of funny. Something just came through to me. This is my thought, not something from the collective, but this is my own thought. And that is, part of me wonders how, part of me was like, this whole thing was very, very chaotic for me in my own brain, and I'm hoping that I was all communicated clearly. Because I've just been processing so much that, I hope it's all been communicated well. Yeah, I mean, your joy comes across in sharing this information. So, I think language-wise, energetically, I think it's all there. For sure.
And again, if we both feel it, that's all that matters.
That's right. That's exactly correct. And honestly, that joyous feeling and that joyful experience is going to be fully imprinted on this. So whoever is listening, no matter when it is, that's a fun thing about time being an illusion as well. So they're going to feel it as well. They're going to feel that energy. So yes.
So it's very interesting. Earlier this month, one of the episodes where we talked about fear, and they're like, real men fear. Well, real men feel joy too.
Absolutely, yes.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, we've been having our joyous conversation for over an hour now, so I think we'll wrap it up. And I'd like to thank our honored guest this week.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend. When our paths crossed that first time back in 2013 there in Boston, I just knew that there was something very special, and I had no idea what would come out of it. And when you talk about gratitude, I cannot find adequate words to express the gratitude that I have for you, for being such a joyous and joyful part of my life. So thank you.
It is my pleasure, and the feeling is mutual and shared, and our shared responsibility of our own choices. I'm trying to wrap this all up some way and flopping joyously.
Right, exactly. That's the fun part.
So what's the best way for people to connect with you, to learn about working with you, to learn more about the principles, to do anything? Well,
sure, absolutely. The tenets, right, exactly. We'll just throw that chaos out there. So that would be the best way to connect with me would be through either my website or on Facebook. Either one. My website is appiohunter.com. On Facebook, I can be found through Appio Hunter, the Emotion Emancipator. That is my page. I also have the Principles of Joy page, which is about to be updated. I think I might be calling it the aspects of joy, because the aspects of joy is like the blog associated with the tenets of joy, right?
Cool.
So those are the best ways. And yes, I'm on Twitter and other social media, but usually I just tweet when something gets published or things like that, or I'm sharing a link from the show. But yeah, that's honestly the ways. And eventually I will have more of a presence. I have been taking a deliberate break from social media, but I will have more of a presence moving forward. It's just because it's that time.
Cool. Awesome. Well, so thanks again to everyone that joined us live. Thanks again anyone listening whenever, whatever joyous time comes to you to find this program. Real Men Fail will be live again next Tuesday, May 23rd, 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be joined by author and co-host of Divine Union TV and psychological theorist Vito Mucci. He's going to join us to discuss finding hope as he shares lessons he learned from spending 8 years at rock bottom.
Wow.
And I think most people have had some experience of their own personal rock bottom, but thank God 8 straight years. No, that was not my experience.
Exactly. So I think this is going to be such a fascinating conversation. Looking forward to it.
It's been a really interesting batch of shows from fear to joy to hope is next, and it's all good, right?
And then we have a great surprise to end the month. But we'll leave that as a surprise.
Well, since we're losing the month, we'll let everyone know that May is Masturbation Month. So
exactly, it's the National Masturbation Month. So we will end on a high note.
Cool. So thanks again for joining us, everyone. Thanks again, Appio, for sharing your wisdom, your collective, your joy. Visit realmenfeel.org. Check out the blog. We'll have the tenets spelled out clearly. If you kind of feel a little bit lost in just listening to them, that's cool. Check us out on Facebook. Send us feedback, and we'll talk to you all again soon.
Fantastic. We'll see y'all later.
All right, be well, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Until next time, visit realmenfeel.org, join the Real Men Feel group on Facebook, and share what you thought of this show. Please give this podcast a review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel. Reach out to us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com and Appio Hunter at appiohunter.com.